Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Most preppers, they focus more on food than they do water. It's interesting. I mean, it makes sense though, because in our minds we think food will run out, but somehow we think water is always going to be there. And it's funny because water is more vital than food. You will die much quicker without water. So we have to have ways to be able to replenish our water. Of course, we stockpile water, at least bare minimum a gallon per person per day. Far more than that, by the way, if you can, plan for a possible couple gallons a day and have lots of water. But we need to be able to find ways to replenish that water and continuously resupply it. So with that, I have 9 ways to get water when crap hits the fan for survival. Number 1, I've talked about in a previous video, rainwater catchment, rainwater collection. It's an excellent way, obviously, to get water. As long as it's raining, we're good to go. I find what a lot of people do is they have a barrel, put an opening in the barrel, and then close it off so that way other things don't get in there, like leaves and squirrels and such. But the problem is, when it comes to this, things wash off the roof. And although you may not have like pine straw running off your roof into your barrel, although that's a possibility too, there's lots of chemicals in the tar, chemicals in the roofing materials, and chemicals from the atmosphere too. So if you're going to do rainwater collection, put them into barrels, make sure you have a way to purify that. And speaking of purifying, I'm going to put out a video soon about the best ways to purify water. There's lots of ways to do it. And there's a lot of confusion there too, because people think you can just boil it. That may be good for biological organisms, but that is certainly not good when it comes to chemicals. So we'll talk more about that soon. Number 2 is a process called condensation. This is not going to like ring your bell, by the way, but ultimately in a lot of places, every morning we go outside, there's dew on the ground. It's moist, it's wet. That's water you can drink. So I'm not kidding you. You can go out there with like a sponge or something and sop it up and put it into a bucket. And you may be laughing, I am. But this is actually how it's done sometimes in arid third world countries. They literally get their water every single morning by sopping up any means they can, and then drink that water throughout the day. So listen to this. I mean, if you have no other way to get water, at least you have that, and that's better, of course, than having no water at all and dying from that. Number 3 is a solar still. We use the power of the sun. It doesn't take a lot of engineering to make this happen, and I'm going to make a video this summer specifically about making a solar still. But ultimately, if you have a hole dug, where inside the hole it's actually usually cooler because it's in the ground, put plastic on top of it, have it so the plastic goes downward with a rock in the middle perhaps, and as the sun heats up that little hole you made, it's going to take the water and it's going to evaporate and hit the plastic, and since you have the plastic going down at an angle, it'll drip down into a pot right in the middle. This is another excellent way to collect water, but it's also another way you're not going to get a lot of water from it. But it is another thing you can do to obviously be able to stockpile and get water ready. The next one, you ready for this? Plant evapotranspiration. There is a word for you. Evapotranspiration. So literally what happens is leafy plants, underneath the leaves, they have holes called stoma. And literally the plant leaves release water. It's all part of their chemical process for making energy through photosynthesis. Really neat. Well, that water coming out of the bottom of the leaves just simply goes off into the air. It evaporates from transpiration, basically is where the term comes from that. So what can you do? Let's say you have a bush in your front yard. You can take a garbage bag, put it over the entire bush, and as the plant evapotranspirates, it's going to release that water. It's going to collect on that bag and drip down to the middle. So there's a $5 word for you that'll give you some water. Next up, a very obvious one that most people think of, river, streams, creeks, ponds, lakes, all those water body sources that you can get your hands on are really great. They really are great, obviously. I mean, most people dream of having some kind of homestead or a bug out place that has a nice creek or river nearby, not only water, but fish and stuff too. So have that, but I warn you, make sure you have, especially in this one, some kind of purifying agent, because if you drink the water that literally some animal has pooed in upstream, drink all you want, it's going to make you sick, it's going to make you vomit, it's going to make you have dehydration, diarrhea, which is going to dehydrate you more, and you're going to end up needing more water. So make sure you purify that. Number 6, of course, is my favorite, and people dream of this one too, is having a natural spring. We, on our property, have a natural spring. A property I had in Colorado years ago had 3 natural springs. They're a lot more common than you think they are. I mean, having like an artesian spring where it comes up and there's pressure is great, but a lot of springs, you simply just have to dig it out and catch the water. Our natural spring on our property here is excellent. It flows year round, and it's really nice, clean water. So even if I didn't have my well, which I'll talk about in a minute, we can tap into our natural spring and go there. Now, how do you know if you have a natural spring? It's funny because the more arid the environment you have, the more clear these natural springs are. Because the way it works is if a natural spring comes out, just like a seed floating through the air or being moved, it'll land in that area and a tree will grow. And often when you see like a desert area, it's all brown and desolate. Then you see one little spot in the middle where there's maybe a couple trees or possibly a bunch of bushes. Especially if it's on a hillside, that's a natural spring. You can go up to that spring. Sometimes it literally has running water coming out of the ground. Sometimes it's a little mushy. Sometimes you may not see anything, but since those plants are there, there's water there. And if you dig down, you can tap into that natural spring. You'll be good to go. And you'll find a lot of the natural springs, by the way, those are the ones that usually have less chemicals and stuff in them because the water often comes from underground. You still have to purify it to make sure or test it, and then off you go. And number 7 is groundwater collection. Of course, this is something that we have used for years and years. We're talking about digging a well. Now, some places, not where we're at. In Michigan, it's the land of water, but our well is 200 feet deep. I'm not going to hand dig a well 200 feet deep. So we actually had to pay some money to get a new well dug when we got our property. But it's some nice, clean, beautiful water. But if you hand dig a well, especially if it's shallow, this has been going on for literally thousands of years. And it's great. I mean, obviously, you'll have it pretty big, so you can literally jump in there if you wanted to. Don't be swimming around in people drinking water supply. But if you pull the water out, it's usually nice and cold and nice and clear. Make sure kids don't fall in it. Make sure debris doesn't fall in it, so close it off. But here is a word of caution. When we talk about having an open well, I shouldn't say caution. This is a good thing. We're talking about cold water. We're talking about refrigeration. Before there was refrigerators, we had refrigeration using these wells. It's not uncommon to get milk or make butter. You put it into a jar and close it off and drop it down with some kind of string into the well so it stays in that water. Then the water keeps it cold. That's how refrigeration's been done for a long time. Number 8, melting ice and snow. I mean, it's like rainwater catchment, but now you have ice and snow outside. There's a couple words of caution about this one. Like, for example, if you go outside and get a giant pot of snow and bring it inside to melt, and it's just like the ambient temperature of the room melting it, which it will, by the way, it's going to cool off the room. And substantially, too, by the way, especially if you're talking about you don't have any power. When we first moved out here in the middle of nowhere, we still hadn't hooked up a new generator. We hadn't, got the jack where we could even power the house, and we would lose power. We're talking about a couple weeks at a time sometimes. And when that would happen, we have a well pump, and our well pump wouldn't work either. Again, we hadn't hooked up our generator. Today, we're good to go. But what would we do? I remember one time we had so much snow. It wasn't a blizzard, but it was super deep. It was one of the heaviest snowfalls we've had here ever. And, of course, we had no power. We had our wood stove, though. And as a family, we took turns going outside, filling up giant pots, put them on the wood stove. Of course, we had to feed the fire more to keep it warmer in here. But we had all the water we could use from the snow. But, there is some risk there, too, because even though you're not catching stuff off your roof, the atmosphere does have some nasty stuff in it. So when you're drinking the water like that, if you don't purify it, then, yeah, that really could cause some problems, too. And then finally, number 9 is distillation. This is a fantastic process, by the way, but it's also fantastically heat expensive. So if you take a pot of water, you could do this with ocean water. Doesn't matter. Take the pot of water, put it on your stove, and boil it. Well, you'll watch it, and the steam will come up over the pot, which is great. But if you can shield it and collect that for condensation go off to the side, welcome to the world of distillation. Even if there's chemicals in that water, if you distill it, then you're going to be getting pure water off the side. But again, the biggest problem, of course, you have to put a lot of heat into it. But it'll do seawater, your stream water, whatever the case may be. It will all work well with distillation. All right, so there's 9 ways. By the way, guys, hopefully you took notes on this. If not, write it down, watch the video again. You want to make sure you have this, put it in your binder. So that way, right now you have lots of water. Right now you have maybe a couple ways of getting water, but this is a really good list of ways to get water, especially in emergency situations. I will talk about purifying using activated charcoal filters versus ceramic filters later. But right now, start getting your stuff in order so you can have water. Because again, most preppers usually focus more on food. I've got 3 years of food, but they only have 3 months of water, which obviously could be very dangerous. So make sure you stockpile, but have ways of getting water also. We'll see you next time.